a water cooled thing that I'll be using soon on a motherboard. It's
Yeah, that's exactly what I have, is something just like
Corsair.
this one is. It's a Corsair too. The one that I have, it's pretty much the same thing.
All right. I think we're live.
Yes,
Yep.
we are live.
Okay.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hey there.
Hi, world.
Yeah. I have a few people here this time. I thought I would add someone new, as Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Hey,
Welcome.
thank you.
And
Good to be here.
So it's like, now the whole idea around these things is it's not like a top 5 list or, counting down type of thing. It's something where these albums mean something to you, whether it's, you heard it a million times, on the radio and it's stuck in you, or if it's something that you picked up and you will go and, if it's an unusual album, and it's like it spoke to you, that's the kind of the criteria I like to, that's the criteria I like to go for, because there's a lot of things out there that they talk about the top 5 or the top 10 type of stuff. And that's, I don't know. I don't particularly like those kind of lists. I prefer if it's personal. So I'm going to start off with Queen Jazz.
Great album.
Good.
I got into Queen in the early 80s when I got that, you remember the greatest hits, and after playing that hundreds of times, I was like going, okay, I want to locate the actual albums where these songs come from. And I got to say that the 70s stuff were fantastic. The 80s, not so much. A lot of misses than hits. But this was one that had quite a few of them. Bicycle Race, Fat Bottom Girls, and then the overplayed Let Me Entertain You. I swear to God, my girlfriend watches these shows where they have singing contests, and I think I heard at least this year alone 100 people singing that song, and it's like, and they have absolutely no understanding what that song. Don't Stop Me Now. They don't have an idea of what that song is. I didn't either until recent times. This was basically written at the time where Freddie Mercury frequent bars in New York, and that was just his response to the other guys saying, to calm down about going there. It's like, because you got an image to uphold. But other than that, I mean, it starts off with a very unusual one, Mustafa. And when I first heard that, I was like going, wait a second, is this Queen or what? And listen to it. It was just kind of the most bizarre thing I had heard up until that point. I mean, there's been many others, but I got this part of the Queen 40th anniversary where it has a bonus disc with the single versions of Fat Bottom Girls and then some. I think it has some B-sides and some live tracks. And this one was just kind of stuck with me to me. And I'm sure a lot of people out there won't like to hear it. This was kind of like the last great Queen album.
Hmm.
In my opinion, it's. I mean, I liked everything up into that, and then in the '80s, it was just little bits and pieces, and they're a great band, but uh, not as consistent as the '70s album.
True.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll turn it over to Robert.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, guys, my first album is this one right here, 1978.
Yep. That
Peter
was a good one.
Gabriel's second album, his second self-titled album, also known as the Scratch album. Well, it featured tracks like DIY, Exposure, On the Air, that's my favorite, among others. Still a bit more low-key than his first and his third albums. But you had Robert Fripp on guitar, Larry Fast and Roy Bittan on keys, along with Jerry Marotta on drums and Tony Levin on bass. All musicians that would work with Mr. Gabriel throughout his long career. That second album did show the very high level of writing and composition that will really shine in the few subsequent albums, which all had monster hits a few years later. So yeah, no, that's my first album for the collection. So up to Alex right now.
Yeah.
Okay, my first selection is going to be Weather Report, Mr. Gone.
Oh yeah.
This has a lot of compositions by Jaco Pastorius, including Punk Jazz, which is one of the famous ones that he did. It's pretty much, you got Joe Zawinul, which is on all the Weather Report albums, Wayne Shorter, Jaco, and Peter Erskine on drums. And to me, every song on this album every tune on the album is great. Things are a little more electronic here. Things are not quite as jazzy, but there's some fantastic bass bits by Jaco, of course. And Wayne Shorter also has some great compositions on this one. And Weather Report is always, in my oeuvre of various choices throughout the years. I mean, even in the 80s, I like their work. So, okay, go ahead next.
Ian?
Okay, I think I'm next. I have a prop because I don't have it on CD or album. So I'm going with National Health of Cues and Cures.
Fantastic album.
When I was first starting to explore prog, Canterbury was one of the first subgenres I dived into. Caravan, Hatfield and the North, and National Health. And this is the second of the two National Health albums that were both released in 1978. It's got three of the members from Hatfield and the North. It was kind of the next band they rolled into. It's got Phil Miller on guitar, Pip Pyle on drums, and Dave Stewart on keyboards. To me, Stewart's the definitive Canterbury keyboardist. That just the sound he gets from that keyboard is absolutely synonymous with that genre. And then the bassist on this particular version is John Greaves. He came in for the second album. He wasn't on the first album. They had Neil Murray on the first album. John Greaves took the second one. It's just full of classics. It's got Binoculars, Dreams, Wide Awake, Calypso. Most of the tracks are 7, 8, 9 minutes long, so lots of long, good tracks on there. It's just lived as one of the classic top 5 Canterbury albums for me. So whenever I'm looking for Canterbury, it's one of the ones I reach for.
If I could say real quick, you can find Calypso live on YouTube, and it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
With John Greaves on bass, just fantastic.
Yep. So that was my first album. Mark?
Okay. All right. Yeah, I guess it's me. So this is my I was 11 years old in 78. And I got to meet my heroes at the time, which were Styx. And they had an album called Pieces of 8. I bought it right from them at a store I live a mile away from right now, Rolling Stone Records. And I just love that album. I immediately bought I bought Cornerstone first. And I got Cornerstone signed by them in 79. And I immediately went back and bought Pieces of 8 in the Grand Illusion. And one of my very few vinyls, because I didn't really get into music until 84 when CDs came out. So I only had about 15 vinyls, and this was one of them. And just iconic openings with Blue Collar Man and Renegade. And I liked it had 3 charting songs, and it was just them. They were playing a lot of in Chicago. They were playing a lot of proms and such. And so they had just started to make it big with 3 albums or 3 songs in the top 20 from that album. So I really enjoyed that. And back to Ron.
Yeah. Okay. My second choice is the Alan Parsons Project Pyramid.
Okay.
I got into them in the early 80s, just buying them on cassette. And I just like their sound. It's just kind of a melodic, I guess you might want to call it prog pop. But it just had a more melodic feel to it. I mean, this has, the songs like What Goes Up and Can't Take It With You. And I found out recently about what the whole thing is. This is actually a concept album about a pyramid.
Interesting.
I never knew that up until recent times. And again, this is has like some bonus tracks on it, but it's like it's one of my favorites from them. I really enjoy it. It's very calming. It's very mainstream sounding, but it's still very calming, and it's one I go to a lot.
Also one of my favorites.
Back to you.
Thank you. All right. My second album that I want to talk about is The Who. Who Are You? It's the second album I ever bought when I was a youngster with hair. That's the original.
None of us have a
44 years ago.
Definitely a classic. I'll give you that for sure.
Yeah. So maybe it's not their best album, but certainly one of their most commercially successful. It reached number 2 on the US charts. It was a true blue classic rock album with proggy overtones. Funny thing, the band at the time was in a bit of a disarray. There was tension between members and with the crew. Daltrey had some throat surgery. Townshend was working on his upcoming solo album, so he was kind of a little bit, which would, and sadly, Keith Moon was on a complete self-destruct mission that would ultimately kill him in September 1978, not even a month after Glory was released. The poor guy was just a mess. His drumming was sloppy at best, and the band had even to rewrite some parts that Moon couldn't even play. So yeah, it was a tough time in the studio to complete this album, but it did see some of the more imaginative work of Townshend on synthesizers and Entwistle on the bass. It was a great album. It had, absolutely great classic tracks. Still a great album, and as I said, it was my second album I ever bought with my own money.
Wow. Yeah, and Townshend had the large ARP 2500 he was playing with.
Yeah,
It's big modular system. So.
That's true. Back to you, Alex.
Okay, so I might lose a little street cred with this one, but it's Rush Hemispheres.
no, all good.
Easily my favorite Rush. They definitely were going through tensions in the band at the time because it was so much effort to get this put out. I saw a complete video for it was an hour long, where they discussed with each of the musicians, what they went through to get this album out, and it was a lot of work. They basically locked themselves up in I think it was in a mansion in England to record it. And it was quite ambitious. So, and this I didn't discover to the late 80s. I really wasn't a rock and roll guy But after I heard some of their stuff, especially on MTV, of all things,
Right.
then I started to listen to it, and I got Hemispheres, and I listened to that nonstop for a long time. So go ahead, Ian. Next to you.
Okay. When I was in my teens, I was all about heavy metal. And when I first started checking out some other music around that, one of the first areas I went into was electronic music. And one of my favorites I bought was Jean-Michel Jarre,
Oh,
Equinox.
yeah.
Top notch.
He produced 2 albums in the 70s, which are absolutely milestones. This one and Oxygen, which are pretty much milestones for
Absolutely.
making electronic music mainstream. It really kind of appealed to the masses. It got a fair amount of significant airplay. This album actually had 2 relative hit singles on it. So it was, to me, it was a gateway drug to a lot of the other electronic music I went to explore. Jean-Michel Jarre was pretty much one of the first ones I went into. Actually got to see him on one of his last tours when he came through Boston a couple of years ago with the huge laser show. It was pretty impressive in terms of one man on stage with a light show. But yeah,
Wow.
Equinox is a gateway to electronics for me. Mark?
Okay. Well, I had Hemispheres on my list too. I'll talk a little bit about it as well. Now that I've become, I would say friends might be too strong a word, but with Terry Brown, and we talked a lot about this album and about how difficult it was and how his stamp is on here more than any other album because of the problems they did have, and he's engineer and arranger on this one, and I think this album and I think the second album is the 2 that he worked most on. And I think that it's just a great album, up and down. I really liked that. Was right in the middle of Fairway to Kings and Rush Through the Times, I think is a greatest hits album. But just some great stuff on this album, 4 tracks, and it really got me started my love of longer formatted songs. And back to Ron.
Yeah. Well, back in the around 83, when that band Asia came out, I was listening to that, and I was then later on, when I was working at the record store, one of the guys that I hired, I told him, I said, I really like this guy, John Wetton, and he's playing. And he says, oh, he said, did you check out his stuff in King Crimson? I said, yeah, I got that. I said, oh, then you need to check out UK.
Oh, yes.
And oh my God, that I was kind of blown away because it had the classic sound, but it had a fresh sound to it as well. It very, I guess you would call it in the jazz area, not fully into it, but I think largely because of Holdsworth and
Holdsworth.
Bruford.
Yeah.
Holdsworth and Bruford, yeah.
Those 2 kind of steered it more in that direction, and whereas Wetton and
Jobson.
Jobson.
Excuse me. Had a brain
His
fart
band.
there.
Anthony's
they
favorite musician.
They kind of wanted to go in, I guess, in the more pop direction, sort of. But this was just amazing. I mean, from start to finish, I mean, it's just, to me, it's one of the most wonderful finds that went from 1978. I was really too young for it. I was 12, so I wouldn't have gotten it. It just took my 30-year-old mind to kind of grasp it. I don't think my 12-year-old mind would have understood it. Probably would have tossed it aside and never look at it ever again. But it's a wonderful one, and I like going back to this one a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely a great album. I had a chance to see them live. I think just after they recorded that when Holdsworth and Bruford left, and that was a fun show. And the music was great. So
Yeah, I was
Sorry, Ron.
I was reading about that. Was Holdsworth and Bruford fired, or did they leave?
They left.
Okay.
Holdsworth hated playing the same music
Yeah.
all of the time.
He didn't like
Jobson
doing that.
wanted him to play exactly the same music all of the time, and Holdsworth just
Okay.
wasn't interested in that. Plus,
Yeah.
Holdsworth was a tortured soul, so
Yeah,
he was always moving on to the next thing
right.
whenever he was
Right.
working.
Yeah.
He-
I mean, that's what happens in bands. I mean, you can't have a perfect union of things. You know, it's
Yep.
like there's always going to have turmoil, especially if they're coming from, different areas. Musically, and
Right. It's the same like in ELP when they did BSS and Tarkas. They were fought every tooth and nail,
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
5 minutes on that one. But it produced such interesting music.
Yeah.
I guess that's
It's a great
the great
album.
thing. I think that's the great thing for us, that they all fighting in the studio to produce something.
At least they got one
fantastic.
album out. At
Right.
least they
And
got
it
one
means
album out.
it
of that
means
by
that
now.
they had passion too, that they cared enough
Yeah.
to speak about it.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
All right, Robert.
all right. Well, thank you. A little bit of Canadian rock right now. Well, on the heels of the success of Rush in the mid-70s, many new proggy rock bands appeared at the end of the 70s. And
Oh yeah,
Saga.
Saga. That's what I thought you were going to say.
their very first self-titled album. That was a spectacular way for Saga to say hello world with this album, which featured tracks like Humble Stance, How Long, Will It Be You, and the very, very beautiful song Perfectionist. The album was very synthesizer heavy, with the awesome crunchy guitar work of Ian Christian. Definitely one or two tunes from that album are nearly every live show the band ever played. It's a great band. It's Canadian, and I'm Canadian, so go Canada. Alex.
Okay, so my next choice, I've always been a big Canterbury fan of all the Canterbury bands, and I started off listening to Isotope, and their second album especially really hit me. But Hugh Hopper I've been paying attention to. So here's an album called Rogue Element that was everyone from Soft Heap on it. It's not quite so well known, and the music is a little more disjointed. But to me, this one was another exploration by Hugh Hopper of interesting things. Let me see if I can read off who's in this. Elton Dean, who everyone knows is from Soft Machine. Alan Gwen, who had a long time partnership with Hugh Hopper on a variety of things. He ended up, unfortunately, passing very early from brain cancer. And then someone named Dave Sheen on drums. And this, to me, was just one of the many Canterbury albums that I really enjoyed back in the day. This one is fairly unknown, but amazingly is on Bandcamp.
Good.
All right, go ahead, Ian. You're next.
Kim.
I'm going to go a bit off track as well. I'm going a bit more classical on here. I'm going back to Steve Reich, Music for 18 Musicians.
Haven't experienced it, but I really enjoy that type of music.
I in the last 10 years or so, I've really got into minimalism. I got into minimalism primarily from bands like Sonar and Nick Barsh's Ronin from the jazz side.
Yeah.
But it opened up the more classical side for me. So I've only had this album probably about 7 or 8 years. So it's not, I haven't had it for a long time, but it's pretty much a milestone album in terms of opening up minimalist music. It's considered one of the very earliest, most popular albums of that style. One track, 56 minutes long. If you get bored by repeated patterns, it is not the album for you,
Right.
because he pretty much plays 11 chords in a pattern with note changes for an hour. But it's transcendental. If you can get in a dark, quiet room and just put it on and have no interruption, it'll take you places. It's a lovely album. Released on ECM. That's generally considered the best release on that one.
There was an interesting album that was released around the same time by someone named Susie, not Susie Chapstick. I've forgotten her last name. She was in a punk band,
Yeah,
and then she went away, studied, and came back and did a minimalist album. That was
yeah.
piano with synthesizer background, and it was really nice. It was like an hour and a half of just sort of the same chords shifting a
Yeah.
little bit here and there. Just beautiful.
That's what this does. It moves a little, and repeats and repeats and repeats. But
Yeah, it's just beautiful stuff.
it's gorgeous.
All right,
Mark?
Mark.
Mark,
Okay. All right. So, I'm not on the highway at all. So just be ready for that. This is the only R&B album I have. It's from 1978. And the guy here on this album, let's see if anybody can guess, had the #1 movie, the #1 TV show, and the #1 album at the same time. Did
Phil
anybody?
Collins?
I
Nope.
think I knew.
Oh, you want to guess, Robert?
The name escapes me, but I have his face in my
The
head.
show or the movie? Do you have any idea what anything? No?
You're not talking about Shaft?
No, I'm going to reveal now. Briefcase Full of Blues.
Oh, the Blues
Uh,
Brothers.
Blues Brothers.
So
Oh yeah,
obviously
That's-
they're not really musicians, right? But they're comedians most. But the album is decent, and they have there's songs in here by it's a cover album, so I almost thought I wasn't going to put it on here, but I thought this is my favorite albums. This is not like not the best albums, right? So
John
this
Belushi, Dan
so-
Aykroyd.
yeah, Belushi.
They're-
They do an album.
the backing band is extremely
It's
famous.
phenomenal.
Yeah, right.
Great
So they-
backing band.
Blue Lou Marini, I believe, is on here. I just off the top of my head, Donald Duck Dodgers. I'm just remembering it
Donald
from
Duck Dunn.
Dunn. Thank you.
Dunn.
And Paul Schaefer, I can see on here from
Yeah, he's on there as well.
Yeah.
and I'm looking at the image here. And you can see maybe it's a little shiny, but you can maybe see a couple of those guys. Mr. Fantastic. I'm just remembering from the movie as well as
The movie
as-
is sublime.
Yeah, the movie was
some
great fun.
some of their names. And I just like I became I just enjoyed these songs by Charles Johnson, King Floyd, and Willie Mabon on here, and I would never have done that without this album. And of course, he had Animal House, SNL, and this album all #1 and by 79, not in 78. This was released in 78, but it didn't go #1 until 79. And just another Chicago tie-in for me, and I just really I really enjoyed their comedy, and of course, we lost John way too early.
Yeah.
The movie has so many references to various Chicago things. It's really
It's
fun.
very Chicago.
Yeah. I do. When I have bands here, I do take them. I take them to Lower Wacker Drive, and for the
Right.
car scene, the
The
car
car
chase
chase.
scene,
Car chasing Lower Wackers.
and a car does jump off of Marina Towers as well. So so we got a couple of those things as well in here, and just a fun album from my childhood, and something I didn't buy until '84 when I bought the CD.
Right.
But back to Ron.
All right. Well, Alex has already mentioned this, but I'll
Okay.
bring it back up. Rush Hemispheres.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, there's
That's
three.
a special edition.
I got into them, oddly enough, like around like in the really early 80s, because a friend of mine gave me Permanent Waves, months after it was released, and for a birthday present. And then, okay, I just wanted to explore this band. So, obviously we didn't have the internet back then, so I had to look in rock magazines and look them up and see what albums. But the best place at that time, and it was much better than Google, is going up to like a mom and pop record shop where you have that hippie guy that he'll know anything. You go to him, you ask him, what do you want? And he'll find it for you, probably quicker than Google. But I got into them that way. And then I went from 1980, I went back and, heard, someone told me first to get 2112, heard that. And that was like, but I felt like I was listening to a science science fiction movie,
Yeah.
and
Definitely.
then I went forward, and once I hit Hemispheres, I was going, from the '70s output, Hemispheres is my favorite too. Like Alex was saying.
Yeah.
I mean, not saying any of the rest are bad. It's just that's the one that I like to go to a lot. If you say, "Oh, what's your favorite '70s Rush album?" I say Hemisphere. I mean, for them to start off with an epic song, I mean,
It's a monster.
yeah, and it's like it just keeps on go. It's like growing and growing, and it's
What's
um
What's always interesting on that album is to watch people do covers, because when you see someone do a cover, then you get a feel for what it takes to play it.
oh yeah, yeah. I'm sure a lot of you have heard or heard of a newer, well, they're kind of a new band. They're also from Canada, a two-piece band called Crownlands.
Hmm.
And their recent album that they did, they formatted it very similar to Hemispheres, starting off with an 18-minute song and then, shorter songs afterward. And it's like, it was almost like someone was saying, because the singer sounds like Robert Plant more than Geddy Lee. So they were almost like saying it's as if Rush and Led Zeppelin had a baby.
That's good.
So
I need to
I mean,
get that album.
it's
That's a-
really good.
that's-
It's really good.
That's a PR man for you.
Yeah, there you go.
Well,
like
I'm just
that. PR
repeating
man.
what they said. But yeah, Rush. That one. To me, that's a great one. Classic. It's one that never gets old.
Right? Can listen to it again and again.
Mhm.
And have you noticed when you do listen to it again and again, you hear something else in there, and I think that's amazing. When music can do that, where it's like, you think
Agreed.
you heard everything, but then you listen to it again, and you hear new noises coming out from different areas. I'm like, especially when they did this anniversary edition. It got things a lot clearer and brought things into the mix that were not muddied, but it just at the time '70s, they
Mhm.
that's just they didn't have, there was very few good producers in the '70s. They just got better as time went on as to how to mix everything. But that's to me a perfect album.
Cool.
To you, Robert.
All right. More Canadian stuff. My next album is one of Rob Leduca's favorite prog bands, Canadian prog rock trio FM.
Oh yeah,
And
that is a
their new
classic.
album, Black Noise. Funny thing, the album was originally released by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC.
TBC, yeah.
It was a limited release of only 500 albums.
Oh,
Wow.
But due to popular demand on the radio and stuff, it was re-released on Passport Records and then on A&M. Finally, it sold well over 50,000 copies, and by then earning the band a gold record.
Wow.
Yeah. It featured my absolute favorite, like Phasers on Stun, Journey, and Aldebaran. It's very, very synth heavy, sci-fi inspired prog rock. The band was composed of Cameron Hawkins on the synth and vocals, Martin Deller on drums, and the late, great, and very colorful Nash the Slash on violins and mandolin.
Yeah, he used to do covers of Phasers on Stun Live all the time.
We were very privileged to see an incarnation of the band at Nearfest 2006 with Martin Deller and Cameron Hawkins. And personally, it was my very first time seeing them live. And I enjoyed the hell out of that show.
That was fun. Yeah.
Alex?
Okay, my next one is probably something you can predict. Brand X masks.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm. Yep.
This is without Phil Collins, so
Yep.
Phil had left at this point. It has a couple of classic tunes on it. Deadly Nightshade being probably the most well-known, because they played that quite a bit live. I'll give you the lowdown of who's on it. Percy Jones, of course, which is part of what makes Brand X. Someone named Chuck Berge, who appears, I think, is German. John Goodsall is on, of course. Peter Robinson's on keyboards. Boy, is he great on this album. I don't know if you ever heard, but Peter Robinson was in an early prog band around 69. They did an album called Mass. And he had this sort of Keith Emerson feel to it in that particular album. But on this album, he's quite good, right in the Robin Lumley style of keyboards. And the whole album is just really very nice. They play some of these things live as well. I think I've heard the Polk live as well, but they're all great tunes. And of course, the great Percy Jones has influence all over it. So that's one of my favorite albums. I burned it out back in the 70s when I bought it. So, okay, Ian, go ahead.
Okay, next for me,
Yeah.
Klaus Schulze.
Klaus Schulze.
Oh,
So Klaus Schulze is a German electronics musician from the 70s. He started out actually as a drummer in the very first lineup of Tangerine Dream,
Yep.
but quickly left to go and become a solo keyboardist.
Yep.
This album's called X, and it's his 10th album. And I consider it one of the masterpieces of the genre. If you're into psych kosmisch electronic German music, it's way up there. It's one of the first ones I reached. It's also great value for money because there's nearly 2 hours of music on this thing. It rolls out into a nice big gatefold.
Is any portion of it live?
There's a bonus track on this version. The last 21 minutes of the album is live as a bonus track, but the rest of it's studio. So, he created it back in 78. It's a tribute to heroes of his at the time. There's every one of the tracks is named for a person on there. Frank Herbert gets a mention on there. Ludwig II von Bayer, Friedrich Nietzsche, George Trakl. There's a whole bunch of different people, but the tracks are all, as you would imagine, on a 2-hour album. They run like 24 minutes long, 18 minutes long, 28 minutes long. So you get the full psych electronic experience with him. It's one of the first ones I go to when I'm looking for something in that area.
But what I like so much about all the cosmic music and all the electronic music stuff is it takes patience.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
It really goes through this whole organic change throughout the piece. So it's not something that instant gratification type people will really
No.
appreciate.
No, it flows.
Yep.
If you want an epic, Mark, these are epics. I know you like your epics.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
8 minutes.
Yeah, I love epics, that's for sure.
epic time.
But is it to me?
Yep, you're on.
Okay. All right. I got the opposite of an epic here. So this is something I had an 8-track back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
And it is definitely not on any of your lists. It is Journey. It's Infinity. And I love this album. It had
Such a classic.
it is kind of classic. Another album like Styx, where the first couple chords are instantly recognizable, and it had Lights feeling that way in any time to begin it, and there was no like dead air in between. They just ran right together. Maybe it was kind of an epic, a 10-minute epic with those 3 songs together. And that was written a lot by Perry, as well as Neil. I don't know how to pronounce Neil's last name. Does anybody know? Sean,
Isn't it? Sean.
Yeah. And I liked this album so much that I went back and I checked out Neil's stuff on Santana. That's what I remember about this album. And I definitely and I always thought they had something interesting on the side 2 and this was kind of the beginning of that. They did that with every album, I remember, just to make sure you flipped it over, because this was an era, the early 70s. It seemed like all the hits were just like this, 1, 2, 4 would be like the singles, right? And this was the one that showed me that, oh yeah, make sure to check out side B. And actually the same thing happened in another album of theirs from 80. What was the album? Escape, I think it was. Exactly the same thing, where the first and third tracks were hits, and then the second track, Stone in Love, was never played on the radio, but was a great track as well. But they always played it when live. And then on the other side, they had a ballad to make sure that you flip the album over.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah,
What I like about that, you know, that part of Journey where it's like you have the mixed vocals of Steve Perry and Greg Raleigh. I mean,
Yeah.
I thought that they fit so perfectly together. And
yeah,
when I was reading it, it's like the next album, Escape, it was I think it was Greg Raleigh's last one.
yeah.
Because he got burned out for the road. So
Right. Right. Yeah, it's a fun album for an 11-year-old, and I was just so in love with that album. I got it in that BMG music thing.
Oh yeah.
for 8-tracks. So that's what I remember about it. I don't have the 8-track anymore though, unfortunately. So,
I think I got that one from the Columbia Record Club.
Yeah.
At the time.
Yeah, I
Right,
remember
exactly.
that one.
Exactly.
10 albums for 99 cents.
Yeah, right, exactly. And then
Yeah.
then you had to buy 5 for $20 each.
Yeah.
in
yeah.
79. But yeah, so I really like Steve Perry's vocals, and I really like the songwriting. I just thought it was just fun, and the harmonizing with Raleigh, like as you mentioned, it's almost like they harmonize like brothers harmonize.
Right.
It's like amazing that they're not related. So
All right.
all right, back to Ron.
All right. Well, my last choice, she's been getting a lot of press because of that show Stranger Things.
Yeah, I was thinking about
And
this.
I got the
Yeah.
first album,
Totally.
Yep.
Kate
Absolutely.
Bush.
Thick Inside,
The
and
beautiful, wonderful Kate Bush.
oh yeah, every song, especially when you hear her voice, it's like you're taken off into like a magical journey. I mean, there's so many great songs on this album, and the story behind the first hit, Wuthering Heights, was the record company wanted. I don't remember what the other one was, but she was very adamant. Says, I want this one. The record label caved, and that was the biggest mistake for the record label to cave on it, because she basically had carte blanche for the rest of her career.
Yeah.
Whatever she wanted to do, she can do that, because they can't touch her. It's like, look, I know what's the hits.
She was huge in the British charts when that came out. When Wuthering Heights came out,
Oh yeah,
she was everywhere in England.
going
Dave
back.
Gilmore was involved in that, wasn't he?
He found her.
That's
I
right.
think it was
Yeah.
through family, I believe it was, and but this was another one that came recommended to me by my friend that I hired in the record store. Because he says he noticed how the stuff that I was putting on the CD player. We were allowed to. They had a 5-disc player, and there was 5 employees, so everyone had a choice. So I put it on, and he noticed that mine was going, at that time for me, kind of eclectics, everywhere from heavy metal to pop music. So it's like, and he goes, you might like this. He said, if you like that UK stuff and King Crimson and all that stuff, you might like her. And at first I was like I listened to it and I was like going, this is very different.
Mhm.
I have never heard anyone sing like this before. And I was mesmerized from that point on. And I've been a fan ever since. So, you know, the early 90s was my introduction into, you know, Kate Bush. Back to you, Robert.
Thank you. All right, guys. Well, I want to highlight that among the 1978 releases, there was a monster album. The band's The Last Waltz.
Yeah.
Right.
It was a gigantic live album featuring an absolute who's who of the greatest musician in rock at the time. But my very last album that I want to talk about is, well, basically it's a band from Quebec. The legendary heart and soul of the Quebec band Harmonium, Serge Fiori, released in 1978 a one-off duo album with another Quebec musician from, you know, the very popular one, Richard Séguin. The album was 200 nuits à l'heure.
Never heard of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never heard of it either.
It's folk, pop, prog rock at its very, very best. It was it actually won the very first Felix Award for Best Album in 1979. Felix Award is the equivalent in Quebec to the Grammys. Among the hits on that album, you had the song Viens danser. You'll have to check it out. It's amazing. It's just really, really, really good.
Yeah, I found some
Features-
of their stuff on YouTube, and I was
Yeah.
like going, oh wow.
It features Fiori's ethereal voice and the beautiful title track of the album, 200 nuits à l'heure. It's really a fantastic album, worth discovering. If you're a fan of Harmonium, you'll love that.
I am. I love Harmonium.
So basically,
band.
that's my stuff.
Very good.
Okay, I was a little conflicted about this because I really wanted to do Art Bears Hopes and Fears, but
Yes, it's on my list.
when I was a kid, I listened to a lot of Eberhard Weber. So Silent Feet.
Oh, nice.
He started to put together his early band, and of course, at this point, Eberhard was just playing acoustic bass. But on the album is Charlie Mariano, Rainer Bluehouse on keyboards, and John Marshall on drums. Of course, John Marshall is from Soft Machine. But Charlie Mariano went on to do some very interesting things with Embryo and some other American jazz musicians back in the 70s. But this album I listened to a lot when I was a kid, and I really enjoyed it. It kind of brought to me a little bit of the jazz world without getting into the old stuff back in the 60s and the 50s. And it's got just a really, I find, a very beautiful feel to it, which is very common for Eberhard Weber's pieces. They move fairly slowly. They don't move real fast usually. And they just are really comfortable to my ears. So, okay, Ian, go ahead.
Okay, I had three I was struggling with to pick for the last one, so I'm just going to give a quick flash to Mike Oldfield Incantations.
Yeah.
And a great North American Canterbury band, The Muffins.
Oh, yeah.
Their
Oh,
debut,
great stuff.
Mana Mirage. Probably one of
Fantastic.
the few albums you can find Steve Feigenbaum, the label owner of Cuneiform, playing on. He plays guitar on 2 tracks on that.
Nice.
Wow.
The one I actually went with to settle with is a band called Widorj.
That's a great album.
They're it's probably the most Magma album out there by a band who aren't Magma. They were formed in this their one and only album. They only lasted the one album. They fell apart immediately afterwards, which seems typical of a lot of Zool bands.
Yeah.
They seem to last one and gone. So they formed in 1977 by 2 Magma members who left Magma after Udu Wudu. And that's Bernard Paganotti on bass and Patrick Gaucher on keys. He was
Gaucher.
also later in He was
Gautier.
also later in Gautier. He was also later in Helden with Richard Pinhas. It's 3 tracks, very, very instrumental Magma, some chanting vocals on there. But it's if you like your Magma, it's a high recommendation for anybody into that Zool world. Go and check out Widorj.
It's a fantastic album, but there's 3 or 4 really great live videos of
Oh yeah,
playing on French TV.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'll check them out.
Cool.
It's really fun, really fun.
And that's my last one.
Mark.
Good, Mark.
Oh, geez, I end this one. So I'll mention an honorable mention myself. I really wanted to do Tubeway Army, Gary Newman's
Oh
opening.
yes,
That's a good one. That's a good one.
And I just saw a thing on synth pop. If you ever want to check out a YouTube video called "How Synth Pop Became Synth Pop," and
It's a great video. Really
You've seen it?
worthwhile.
really, yeah, it's got 1 million views or almost, and it's 20 minutes or so. And I just want to say that when progressive rock was starting to go to pop, synth pop of all things was actually using synthesizers more progressively than prog was. So it's a very interesting time for me. The first album I remember hearing and asking, who is that? Was actually Gary Newman in Cars, actually. And the cool kids were listening to Gary Newman, and I was a cool kid for just a week or two there in 8th grade.
I was never a cool kid.
It was
Never.
Our friend's Electric is the one that grabbed me from him.
Yeah, that's another good one.
Ultimately, I had to go with a guy I've seen in concert 20 times. You mentioned a 5 CD carousel, Ron, and our 5 CD player, right? That must have been a carousel, right?
Yeah.
So I had you one better. I had a 6 CD exchange. These are Pioneer.
I had that at home.
I remember those.
I could swap this right in and into my home system, and I could put it in the trunk of my car. And I have 6 CDs in my car. Who would ever need more than 6 CDs, right? Yeah, and so these are, you can't tell, but this is 12 Billy Joel albums, and the Billy Joel album of 78 was 52nd Street. And I'll tell you a little story about 52nd Street. Only the Good Die Young was on the album prior, which is the Stranger, and the church didn't like that song because it's the Catholic girls are much Catholic girls. Well, I can't remember, much too late. Yeah. And the church didn't like that. So he sent a copy of 52nd Street to the Pope and other religious figures in New York, and asked them if they could please ban this album too, because the Stranger went to #1 after that. So
it's so funny. That's so funny.
So I definitely like this album. It's always about, Billy Joel always talks about what's going on in his life. And Rosalinda's Eyes is on here. It says his mom, Stiletto. Zanzibar has some baseball references. There's 5 songs with baseball references on Billy Joel albums, and that was one of them. And he's re-released videos for this whole album lately. And I actually have it twice. Actually, I don't know why I bought a second one, but I got a nice price one here too, as well as one in there. And I just like to. I remember when my mom was pissing me off, I would blast My Life. All right, yeah, you think you don't owe me? This is my life, type of thing. So
Right.
that was my little anthem for a bit. And of course, all the hits were on the first disc and on the first side of the vinyl, and all the songs I like were on the second. Stiletto, Rosalinda's Eyes, Until the Light, some interesting drama in that one, and 52nd Street was the street that the studio was on, and so it's just kind of a fun album for me, and produced by Phil Ramone, who I always kept an eye on after this album too. And that's it.
Yeah, I really like, with the exception of the Rush album, I think everyone had completely different things. So it's like it's great because you can anyone that watches this,
Right.
if whatever we spoke about, if it sparked interest, they can go and explore it. And then of course you're going to go down the rabbit hole.
It's
Right.
an
Yeah.
absolute great selection of all styles of rock and prog rock and pop rock. It's
Right.
really good. It was quite a fun year.
Yeah.
1978 had some really, really good stuff.
It was hard cutting it down to 5.
Yeah, for
Yes,
sure.
It was.
It was
It was really
It was
hard.
hellish.
It was a hard choice between Art Bears and Eberhard
Art-
Weber for me.
Art Bears were on my list as well.
Yeah, the good
Well,
thing, the ones that
oh.
I got cut off of me were what have you guys covered, so that worked out well. Like,
Before I invited Alex, Mark, and Ian, Robert and I were actually going to do 10 each,
yeah,
to fill in the time because, but then when I started,
writing more.
getting the people joining, I was like, going, okay, we got to put that back down to 5 because if we did 10 each, I think we'd be here for hours.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it's 4 o'clock. We've been there for 1 hour.
That's
Yeah,
good.
So we're doing good.
Yeah.
Doing good. But I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me.
Good to be here.
I am going to be doing more of these type of favorite albums of
Okay.
certain years, and the next one on June 3rd is going to be 1983.
Okay.
Oh,
Sounds
So
Very
good.
good.
if I can get you guys back, that'll be
Sure.
fantastic. If
Very good.
if you're
I'll
not
be
busy,
there. I'll
Um,
be there without any problems. It'll be
yeah,
fun.
and we'll it'll be fun because we're going into a new decade.
Yeah. Thanks for
Good.
hosting this, Ron.
yeah.
Yeah.
So thanks for
Yeah.
hosting.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you,
Yeah.
sir. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah,
See you
so
later.
I'll see you guys next time.
See
All
you
right.
next time.